Hi everyone, my name is Ishan and you are listening to the Karwaan Cinema Archives. So I got in this beautiful conversation with Apurva Asrani, who is a National Award, Filmfare Award and Screen Award winning filmmaker based in Goa. He has written the human rights drama called Aligarh, the courtroom drama Criminal Justice Behind Closed Doors, and has co-written and edited the film Shahid. He also edited the popular gangster film Satya and also the web series called Made in Heaven that came out in 2019. He also was the director of a very popular music video, Tera Mera Pyar, by Sony Music India. And Apur made his web series writing debut with the 2021 Disney Hotstar show Criminal Justice Behind Closed Doors. The show starring Pankaj Tripathi, Kirti Kulhari, Anupriya Goenka, and Deepthi Naval received glowing reviews and garnered record viewerships for Disney Hotstar. And in 2021, this show became the first Indian show to win Best Drama Series in South Asia at the Content Asia Awards in Singapore. So, in this conversation, I asked him about his journey, about his cinema, and much more. So, enjoy the conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Karwaan Cinema Archives. I'm Ishan Sharma. And for today's conversation, as you all know, we have Apurva Asrani. So, without further ado, let's go into the conversation. Thank you, Apur, for accepting the invitation. It is truly an honor speaking with you on Caravan.
Thank
So,
you for having me, Ishan.
So Apurva, as I have heard, your life story is also kind of cinematic because your parents met in a theater in Bangalore. They fall in love, and then uh, you come into existence in some senses. So tell us about your family background, your early film experiences, and yeah, let's start with that.
So my father was quite a movie buff actually, and he taught himself Bengali. He's a Sindhi man from Bombay. He taught himself Bengali through the cinema of Ray, Satyajit Ray, because he loved his cinema so much that he had to learn the language and not rely on. There weren't easily available subtitled films back in the day, and all of that. So my father had watched the cinema of Ray of Kurosawa, of Gurudat, and had greatly admired these talents. So right from my childhood, I'll go back to the cinema hall, but right back from my childhood, I remember that the films that were shown to me were like Reyes Gopika and Bhagabai, or Kurosawa's Throne of Blood. Um, Cinemas. I mean, all the greats from the world of world cinema were I was kind of exposed to their work, and my dad did it in a very enjoyable way because he also sang the songs and like Ami Chini Go Chini from uh, um, uh, it was Charulata, if I'm not mistaken. So he basically would make it very entertaining to, to watch these films, and it was never like oh yeah, art cinema, hai, it's too slow or anything like that. He celebrated this kind of stuff. Um, and to backtrack a little bit, and my mom was a Bharatnatyam dancer in Bangalore, South Indian girl. My father a Bombay boy. So I think it must have been 76, 75 or 76 when Sholay had released Sholay, the Ramesh Sippy Sholay, had released no less than Sholay. So we had actually, we are saying, my parents had met in a cinema hall in Bangalore screening Sholay. So my mom had come with her friends. They were allowed that one movie outing a fortnight, and they looked at this huge queue, and this film had become a big hit. And my mom's friends told her that you won't get tickets. Uh, let's go ask somebody in the front of the queue. So there was this good-looking man, single, solo, standing at the front of the queue, and we're like, my mom went to him and she flicked her hair and said, "Excuse me." Buy tickets for me. He said, yes, one ticket. She said, no, six. My father bought like 7 tickets and sat next to my mom. And my mom, Telugu speaking girl, and Hindi was 50-50. So my dad translated the film. Amitabh Bachchan's character died. My mother cried. Father pulled out his hanky, and here I am. That's the. So there has been cinema in the blood, actually, arts in the blood, and all kinds of cinema, all kinds of arts. Like I said, there's Bharatnatyam, there's the cinema of Gurudat, there's the cinema of Raj Kapoor, the cinema of Ray, there's the cinema. Pretty much that. Another interesting anecdote to take the Satyajit Ray story forward is how I got my name. So my dad, as soon as I was born, he got a job with Air India, the international airline, and he basically was flying one of his early flights, and my mom was pregnant with me in a womb. And my father's joy knew no bounds when he met Satyajit Ray as his first class passenger. And of course, dad just sat down there and sang I'm Chini Go Chini and treated him like, like my getting this job is worth it for this one interaction alone. And Mr. Ray was very gracious. Apparently, my dad tells me that he was extremely humble and struck up a conversation. The plane landed in Bombay. They were coming back from London. Plane landed in Bombay, and my dad offered to drop Satyajit Ray to his hotel. And my father's brother had come to pick him up, and my father was like, "Please go home. Give me the car. You go. This is my moment." And he drove Ray. And during those conversations, I think my dad realized that he would name his unborn child or his about to be born child Apurva from the Apu trilogy. I think they pronounce it Apurva. And so that's how I was named. Yeah.
Wow. And how did you think of becoming a film editor? Because I think film editing is that hidden kind of job in the industry. So how did you think of becoming an editor?
Well, I never planned to be an editor per se. I always wanted to be a storyteller, a filmmaker, a director, a writer, whatever. Um, but it wasn't easy back in the day to enter the film industry. We didn't have that much exposure. We didn't have those many avenues. Uh, People from my family kind of backgrounds and stuff like that rarely uh, gotten to film. So um, the moment I got like an opportunity, and the opportunity presented itself because um, I, 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 in college, I was very active in the dramatics, elocution, all of these societies. I was also part of the Road Track Club. I was a club service director, constantly organizing events, participating in events, intercollegiate competitions. As much as I could do to stay out of the classroom, I did. And I have no regrets at all because there are different kinds of classrooms. Sometimes you choose your classroom. My classroom was in my canteen where I had my meetings to plan the next event and things like that. So there was this one event that I participated in, and also my road track club had organized, which was a music video making competition. So you basically took a home video camera. I didn't have one. I borrowed it from a rich uncle and went and there was a theme on the underprivileged children of the city, and we had to basically shoot a music video and cut it to one of the tracks that were uh, offered. Uh, so I picked John Lennon's Imagine, and I shot these street children who were just having an absolute gala time in the monsoons. And it wasn't really of their suffering and the darkness that one expects. It was them getting on with life and making the most of what they had and retaining their innocence and joy. So that was the video, and I cut it VCR to VCR because that's all one knew. So I borrowed a friend's VCR, and he had my VCR. तो यहाँ से play करके यहाँ पे थोड़ा record करो, यहाँ पे play करके record करो. I don't know how it actually sat in sync, uh, and it went on to win the best director award. Um, and one of the judges was the producer and the director of BPLO, Sunil Sarjwani, who ran a company called Bombay Talkies. This was 1995, and I was all of 17 years old, just a few years younger than you. And I went and I approached him and I said, "Sir, I would love to work with you." Another excuse to get out of the classroom, even further than the canteen. And and I started working with this amazing team. And suddenly, I mean, I saw, because you see, it was MTV at that point in time, and MTV ran on a 2-hour band on Doordarshan, believe it or not. And the show subsequently very quickly moved into this newly launched Star TV, Channel V. Uh, and now suddenly we had access to amazing offline editing equipment, the stuff that I'd never seen before, where you digitized your material and then you cut it digitally. You could scrub through, go backwards, forwards in a jiffy like that. It was fascinating, actually. And our creatives came from Hong Kong and Singapore, and there were people from around the world who were involved. So our packaging, our style, and everything was quite slick. Uh, so it was. I was very lucky to get that kind of training, and we were doing, as we were discussing earlier with Saurav as well. We were doing something called the masala mix, um, which was a really amazing place to learn, because you took, um, say, a Govinda song, or a hit Govinda song of 1995, and then you cut it to a Michael Jackson's video. So you had Michael Jackson dancing and lip syncing, literally lip syncing to "You Are My Chicken Fry, You Are My Mutton Fry," something, hi, hi, whatever, you know. And it was magic to be able to do that, uh, to be able to make Michael Jackson sing a Govinda Bapi Lahiri song. It was magic, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is what editors can do," uh, you know. And so that was the training ground, and then I moved on to doing with another company, doing promos for feature films. There again, I got lucky. I got to do promos for a film called Khamoshi, which was Sanjay Bansari's first feature film, I think. And those promos did very well. They were celebrated. And then I got more promos to do. Once again, I'm learning to work as an editor through this thing, experimenting with new equipment, digital, non-linear. And during this, one of the projects I got was a film called Dod, which was directed by this incredible director, Ram Gopal Verma, who had made Ragila uh, not too long ago. And I had been fascinated with Rangila. I had been actually by chance at the film shoot. They were shooting at an amusement park, Amir Khan and Rangila, and I must have been 15 years old or whatever, walking around looking at this in awe, being like, wow, would I ever be part of something like this? And I'd look at my dad, airline cabin crew, and I look at my mom, housewife and hairstylist, and I was like, well, how would someone like me get into this? It's just not going to be possible. And here I was, had the opportunity to cut promos for Ram Gopal Verma's new film, and I wanted to meet him desperately. So I worked very hard, and I was like, this has to be the best ever. So good that he at least has a conversation with me. And it happened, and that conversation was amazing because he really liked the spin I had given his material, fully with the intention that I want to win over this man. Very easy. Day and night, I worked with that intention. And and we just one day, as part of our discussions and after one of our edit sessions on the Dog promos, he told me about Satya, and I said, Ramuji, you should edit Satya on this non-linear system called Avid. So what is Avid and stuff? So I explained to him how it works digitally and all of that. Great, I like it, Apurva. He says, why don't you edit it on Avid? I said, sure. I said, what do you mean me edit it? So he said, I want you to edit the film. I said, like the promos of the film. He said, no, the film. I said, are you sure? So he said, you seem to be having some doubts. I said, not at all. I'm never ever going to show you any doubt again, Namaji. And that's how I became a film editor.
And you were probably the first editor to introduce the Avid editing software in Hindi cinema. Did you use the same software in the TV shows and film promos that you edited?
So it evolved. I mean, there was something called Division before we got into Avid, which was similar kind of thing, but not as evolved as Avid. Avid came about while I was doing promos. Of course, I had graduated to doing working on Avid. Uh, and to be fair, the first Indian film to be edited on Avid was a film called Iruvar, which was the visionary Mani Ratnam, who did it in Tamil cinema. Um, and it helped me to pitch this to Ram Gopal Verma, to say that Mani Ratnam's done it. Oh, Mani Ratnam's done it, I'll do it. It was like that. Yeah.
So you became a film editor at the age of say 18, 19 when you did Satya. So did age play in your favor? Because sometimes in our society, when you are younger, you are not taken very seriously. Because I have faced that. I'm not sure if it was the same with you. How was your experience being the youngest, quote unquote, to be the editor in the industry?
No, it's very true. I mean, the first thing they do is they ask you your age, and they kind of say, "Oh, you're 19, you're 18." Acha, 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 acha. Sit, have a coffee. I'll see you in some time. That kind of a thing, and I didn't like that because at the end of the day, I was the head of a department on a very important film, and it was important that. So I lied about my age. Since I was very young, I always increased my age by 2 years. So when I was 18, I told them I'm 20. When I was 19, I'm 21 years old. I also made the mistake of picking up a cigarette at the time with the uh, belief that this will make me look uh, older. Uh, and so you do that for a while, and ultimately afterwards you realize that what ultimately counts is your dedication towards your craft, the passion that you have for it. And I think that ultimately wins over uh, everyone. You know, it really didn't matter to me how old you are. The point is that you're very passionately archiving stuff that needs to be archived in this country, which is really the need of the hour, like I was telling you earlier, right? So you represent that. You're the holder of that right now. And for me to belittle that, what you're doing by slotting you into your age is belittling the bigger picture. So eventually, as the edits went on and people came into the editing room, people like Shekhar Kapoor and Gulzar Saab and all of them, and the greater they are, uh, the bigger they are, I have realized, the more humble, the more childlike. So the moment I would meet a star who would come in and first his staff would come in to announce his arrival, and then he would come and you all had to stand up and all of that. I knew that this person is not one of the greats. But when someone like Gulzar Saab walks into the room and he puts his hand on your shoulder, and he says, "Beta, ye kya? Ye kaise karte ho? Ye kya hai kya?" Acha, acha, and he sits down next to you, and then he asks you those questions, and after 5 minutes, you forget that this is Gulzar Saab, and this is another passionate, creative person sitting next to you. That's a great uh, person. Shekhar Kapoor was like that. Made me very jealous by talking about the great editing of Jill Bilcock, his editor who had done Elizabeth, that film he had just done at the time, and all of that. and Jill edits like this, and Jill does this, and Jill does that, and whatever. And Ram Gopal Verma saying, Apurva, does this, and he does that. And it was great fun. I mean, um, this kind of exposure to get Basu Bhattacharya, the filmmaker, he took me under his wing. He had just made Astha with Rekha, and called me for the trial, and he would sit and explain to me, okay, Apurva, this is before Ram Gopal Verma. Your camera really needs to be non-obtrusive. It needs to just capture like a fly on the wall, and that's how I do it. And I said, great, that's how I do it. And I made Ram Gopal Verma was like, camera yahan rakhte, ye angle, from this angle, from that. And I'm like, that's the magic of cinema. You have all kinds of voices, and you learn from all of them, and then you eventually, you find your own style.
Yeah. So, Satya, that was your first and kind of changed the grammar of Hindi cinema narrative in some senses. And uh, Ram Gopal Verma was considered to be a disruptor in the 90s when he came up with Rangila or Satya. Satya kind of made the grammar, wrote the grammar for gangster films in India in some senses. So, you mentioned about your early conversations with the Ram Gopal Verma about how you introduced him to avid editor and all. But how was the overall experience working with RGV? How difficult was it? How easy was it to work with a filmmaker like RGV?
It was actually the easiest. I had no real experience of working with another great director before Ram Gopal Verma. So I didn't have any precedent. Um, but I do remember that he was least bothered about his past achievements. Uh, he really didn't wear that on his sleeve. Um, he did try and put up a very serious kind of a maintain some boundary kind of a vibe. But me being uh, an Aries 19 year old boy, for me, those boundaries were just to be, crashed, because that's the only way we could, do the kind of uh, work that we eventually ended up doing. It was very intimate. Um, so initially, like Ram Gopal Verma would give me like a target saying that, Apurva, look, I'm shooting between these hours and these hours, and you have these many scenes ka rushes. I want rough cuts of these money by this time, kind of a thing. And I'd be like, okay, Ramoji, and he'd go, and then I would start editing it, and I would find like start tripping on one scene, like say the opening scene of Satya, it had a certain purpose and a place in the film, in the screenplay as it was at that point in time. But while cutting it, I found that one could interpret it very differently, and kind of bring in the spirit of the movie or that we are finding later on, kind of foreshadow it at the beginning. So instead of cutting those 5 scenes, I would spend that entire time cutting that one scene, but I would cut that one scene in a way that was not planned, right? Uh, to disrupt again. That was the thing. You're working with a disruptor of that caliber. You better follow that kind of a spirit. And then Ram Gopal Verma would come into the edit, and sometimes he would come a little early and would be like, walk into the door, and I would be like, no, Ramuji, I'm not ready. So he's not used to that. Wow, but I have only this much time. I said, yeah, but I'm going to show you something really amazing. Please wait outside. How long, Apurva? I can't. I have to go somewhere. Whatever. I'd be like, no, Ramuji, you will really love this. Please wait outside. So I put him outside the editing room. 18-year-old kid, and there's Ram Gopal Verma who's like going red in the face. He's like not expecting this. So he goes outside. We were editing at a place called Videocraft, which was Rakesh Roshan's editing studio. He had added back in the day. And so the editing rooms typically have this little one glass window through which you can peep in, and I'm editing, and suddenly I can feel that someone's watching, and I look behind, and Ramoji's on his toes, trying to see what this boy is cutting. So then I had an assistant who was even shorter than Ramoji. So I would make her stand on a stool and block the No, seriously, we did all these things. We had so much fun with it because, you know, we were all smaller than the film. Everyone, everyone, including Ramgopal. And he wore that attitude, um, you know. Um, so that humility made it very easy to work with him. And so then he would walk into the editing room, and after all that build up, I would be really nervous. Ki shit, now what if he doesn't like it? They may naukri to gayi, and but he would. He liked the audacity with which I did what I did. He liked the fact that I was, rewriting the way it was perceived, even just to see it as an option. There were times we would go back to what was originally planned, you know. But the fact that we disrupted it and we saw the option, and we know for sure that this option is now the best option, was how we cut Satya.
There is a scene in Satya after which RGV got to know the direction in which he should make the film, and I'm talking about the scene where Sushant Singh's character Pakya comes to Satya and tries to extort money for the neighborhood orchestra, and then Satya slits Pakya's throat with a blade, and we hear Pakya screaming. That scream continues, to the second
Yeah.
scene, which I think in editing is called the J-cut technique. Uh,
What's it called? Sorry, let me make a note of this. What is it?
I had to use a technical term.
Oh,
so,
damn.
so
J cut.
yeah, I think.
Okay, good.
Can you
Yeah.
please take us through the scene? What was the brief that was given by RGV, and what was your response as an editor after watching that scene, after the rough scene?
So much of what was happening on Satya, the rushes that one got, were always unexpected. You know, we had been sat through multiple narrations, discussions, which used to happen in Ramoji's Varsova flat over vodka, and everyone was there, from Urmila Matondkar to Saurabh Shukla to Anurag Kashyap to Manoj Bajpayee to the assistants to the editor to the DOP Mazhar Kamran and Jared Cooper, and everyone was there. So that spirit of, you know, we are all part of something, extremely enjoyable and also extremely brave, because you see the context is so important. What you see in Satya was what we were living at the time. Producers were getting shot every day. Rakesh Roshan was shot at. One of the production controllers of Satya was assassinated before the film released. So things like this were very real. So this particular scene that you're talking about, I remember very vividly because it was not. Yeah, I had I had seen this scene on the shoot, and it was we had resumed shoot after many days. I think it was August 11th or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. It was either the day after or a couple of days after, or maybe the same day that the producer Gulshan Kumar of the series had been shot dead, not too far from where we were shooting this Tabela scene. You know, now Gulshan Kumar was a friend of Ram Gopal. You know, and the man was extremely shaken because you see, here you are making something so sensitive, and dealing with all these characters, and uh, you know uh, and your friend who's another producer has got shot just 5 minutes away. So it took a lot of courage for Ram Gopal Verma to actually carry on the shoot. So it was that particular shooting schedule around that time where the Pakya orchestra karne ka hai basti mein scene was to be shot. And the way Ram Gopal Verma used to work. In fact, I just met an actor recently who worked in one of his recent films here in Goa itself, who told me, he said, I was just blown because he first of all he cast me just like that. I thought I have to go through a series of auditions, and then I'm here on set and I'm like waiting for the great Ram Gopal Verma to give me direction, and he rolls the camera. He says, "Just do." So I he fully freaked out. It was pasine chhoot rahe uske. So uh, then he first, of course, he was a bit nervous about it, but then apparently he did it. And Ram Gopal Verma saw it and whatever, and he planned his next move with this actor based on what that actor did instinctively, right? And I've realized that's something that he's retained. I haven't worked with him in years, but it's very evident that that's how he works, and it's a fascinating way to work in which um, you don't control so much. You know what you're going for, uh, but you have somebody in front of you who has a particular kind of energy, and you want to see what he's going to give you or she's going to give you, and you allow that to happen, and based on that you steer into the direction that you want. And that's what happened with the Pakia Scream. So what Sushant did, his Scream was, of course, unexpected to everyone. He's a fantastic actor, that guy. But I think it also embodied the the kind of fear that was in all of us because of what was happening in Bombay at the time with Gulshanji's death and all of those things. So that was the sur that I think Ram Gopal Verma caught on to, and he has often attributed the uh, uh, the film that was. It says that this film was shaped by that. Uh, so a lot of the scenes that were shot subsequently also were improvised, spontaneous, not necessarily written earlier on. Anurag Kashyap and Saurabh Shukla, the writers, were actually on the ball on the set, figuring out कि अच्छा अच्छा अब ऐसा करते हैं वैसा करते हैं रामू सिंह अच्छा विल गो इन दिस डायरेक्शन या फिर चलो घर पे चलो वर्सोवा में वोडका पीकर हम लोग कल का सीन प्लान करते हैं so that's how it happened and there were a lot of things to to use voiceovers to use audio to trail even in Amos Shukla's killing later on I mean when Satya is explaining हम Amos Shukla को ऐसे मारेंगे ये करेंगे वो करेंगे हमारे भाई को मारा है हम उनके भाई को मारेंगे so Satya was very deadpan and the way he was delivering that was just chilling right but then we had these wonderful shots of Amos Shukla with his family having dinner that was a preamble to another scene where Khandelkar is coming home and one said why not use this uh, uh, as an to underlay the plan so the man is so oblivious he's having breakfast with his family you know and here there is this massive plan to assassinate him so these kind of things began and it began with as you pointed out this J cut, which of course I knew it was a J cut. Not. So, that kind of thing where the audio trails, he's going on screaming and there's a steady cam shot. And steady cam was so new, Ram Gopal Verma was using it. Nitin Rao was the steady cam operator, one of the first in our industry. Um, the steady cam shot just lent itself to that scream, which was, already so long, you know, that you kept it trailing. And I think later on, Ram Gopal Verma and our sound engineer designer, H. Sridhar, who passed away sadly from Chennai, um, I think they elongated it even more, to match now the shot that one had laid. So it was that kind of teamwork. You see, everyone was feeding off each other, but so that kind of set the tone for us to do these kind of audio overlaps, intercuts, jump cuts, flashes and things like that, which kept the horror of what was going on. Because on the face of it, they were singing Goli Maar Bheje Mein and cracking Ram or Sham jokes and doing all of those things. But you scratch the surface and there's a blood-curdling scream. You scratch the surface and Chandar is laughing in a flash cut, and so this kind of motif was born, yeah, organically.
Yeah, I also want to talk about the opening monologue of Satya, where it mentions that Mumbai never sleeps and the underworld and the economic disparity. So I have read somewhere, I'm not very sure, so I'll kind of will see if that narrative matches with you. That it was the creation of the editing table. It was the editors who kind of created that monologue, added that monologue in the film. Is it true?
Yes, there was no monologue there at the beginning. There was no context. There wasn't any of that. But there were some incredible montage shots that Jared Hooper and Mazhar had shot around Bombay. You know, you bring a guy from Hollywood in here who's never seen this city, and you give him a camera, and he went ballistic. You know, Ganpati Visarjan shots, and city shots, and kids playing cricket outside slums, and you know, but you had these magnificent high rises, and so there was this really beautiful material that one tried to use during the film, uh, before a scene or after a scene and that kind of a thing, but it still didn't do justice uh, to what it was. So it's one of those scenes that I was telling you about. Like I'm expected to आज मैं चार scene Apurva काट के देगा, but नहीं, Apurva has decided he wants to do the opening montage of the of the film. Um, so that's one of the things that you know, I started to cut this montage at the beginning. Um, and once I had cut the montage, I'd used some lovely music and stuff like that. I felt like it needed a voiceover, you know, because I think it was also something that Ramu had always wanted to start the film with a man from nowhere appears at Victoria Terminus, and this is his story: a man with no background, right? But whenever he would watch that, he would always feel like there was something missing before that. I would try cutting it like this, try putting a little bit of Bombay shots before that. I would try doing this. He would try to tell me those kind of things, and it never really, it didn't really come together. Um, and then I think I had finished the first cut of the film, and the film ends with Sabir Masani, this long-haired guy, gangster in the film, who uh, is looking at a newspaper in which he reads about the death of the underworld and people that he knows, and their killings in encounters and stuff like that, which almost looked like the underworld had lost, you know. Uh, and there were some great shots. There were some funeral pyre shots of Urmila's father, you know, which were also very powerful. So, because just to give it context, because Satya couldn't exist without that context. He could not enter the city without that context. You couldn't enter the cinema hall without that. Was the reality that we were living. That needed to uh, come through. So I began with uh, this Mumbai, एक ऐसा शहर जिसे नींद नहीं आती, एक ऐसा शहर जहाँ चमक दमक की ऊंचाइयां है, एक ऐसा शहर जहाँ खामोश अंधेरी खाई है. So you're talking about the disparity. You're talking about the chasm between the two different Bombays. Um, and Isi Beach, you're talking about the Mumbai underworld that exists within it. And then you see Kallu Mama lifts his gun from a scene later on where um, I think who gets killed? I think Makran's character gets killed. Makran Deshpande, the lawyer, Mule. Uh, so took a shot from there, took a shot from here. So you see, when you see the film later on, you recognize that what the sir and pair of this shot was. At that point in time, it told you a different story. It gave you just the outside kind of a overview of what this was. And that montage kind of ended with Sabir Masani shooting the newspaper and the funeral pyre shots, and then you go into the city and stuff like that. Of course, my Hindi, way back especially, was quite kacha. I wrote a lot of it in Hindi, in English, and then Manoj Vajpayee and Khandilkar, the actor, I will forget his name, wonderful actor. Um, so they had come to the editing room. They would just come to hang out and that kind of thing. And then they saw it, said, बहुत अच्छा है, पर ये मतलब ग्रामर थोड़ा ऑफ है यार, ये हिंदी में आपको उसको यूज सही करना है, ये करना. So then they wrote the correct translation and added more to it, which we recorded for before Ramoji could watch it. And after Ramoji saw it, and he leapt up in his chair and all of those things. I mean, if he was one of those Shahenshahs, he would have given me his pearls, from his neck. And, I would really wait for those moments where, and then Anurag polished it even further. And, yeah,
That monologue reminds me of Saeed Akhtar Mirza's Salim Langde Pe Matro, where he
right.
says कि इधर सलीम लंगड़ा भी है, सलीम लूला, सलीम पेंटर और
Yeah,
तमाम.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
True that. So many of these things sit in our subconscious because we've grown up on all this wonderful cinema, you know, and bits by bits, I think they come forth and they become yours. You make them yours. That happens a lot, I think.
yeah, and also the newspaper montage that you were referring to, the montage sequence of underworld gang war, was kind
Yeah,
of inspired from the Godfather film where newspaper
right,
montage Alonso uh,
right.
was killed.
Yes. Ramoji was and is, as everyone knows, a major Godfather fan. Uh, and So not only like these moments that were inspired from and stuff like that, he also had the most incredible collection of background music I had never seen. It was like, and for me who loves working with music and stuff like that, I was a kid in a candy store when I saw his collection, and I would read it. Ramuji, I'm taking this, I'm taking this, I'm taking this, I'm taking this movie, that thing, and I would go and I would digitize it, and then I would cut, uh, to a lot of Godfather themes and Abyss themes and things like that, Predator and all these things.
People often think that editing a film is all about maintaining the pace and the length of the film, but I feel that an editor also maintains the emotional tone of a film, how well it balances with the emotions. So, what is your process of editing a film, and what goes on in the editing table, in the editing room?
Satya was a 2 hour 42-minute film. You see, so we definitely length was not a criteria for us then, but it was still a film that won some of the major editing awards and was really celebrated for all its departments, including its editing. So what you're saying is right. It's not the length as much as it's about the emotional graph of the film. Uh, as long as you're hooked, you're invested, you're not dropping the ball. You're feeling for the character. You're anticipating what's going to happen next with the character. As long as you've got that rhythm going on, right? I think that's pretty much one of the core skills of an editor. To maintain that. Obviously, I knew none of these things, and I started out. It was all learning on the job, learning from the greats like Ram Gopal Verma and Shekhar Kapoor and Gulzar Saab, and those kind of things. And then the moment I would meet Gulzar Saab, I would go home and watch Ijazat and watch this. Now that I've met him and I have his hand on my shoulder, how am I going to now? What am I going to see in these films and stuff like that? You know. So the the one of the things I've always tried to be most true to is the character, see, or the characters. You know, where is Viku Matre going with this? What is he feeling in the last scene? What happened to him there? Therefore, when I see him again, what am I expecting? Do I want to just completely uh, break that expectation? Do I want to continue with it? You know, um, I, you know, you've left him asking a question or desiring something. I need to answer that question right now. And if I'm not answering it, then there's something wrong with my screenplay, with the narrative. Uh, so these things, I think, very subconsciously, I think, uh, come into play when you're editing a film. In several films, whether it was, say, a film like Satya, I think uh, both both Satya's character and Viku's character, their energy is what I would pick up on. because it was a two-hander in many ways, you know. So to pick up on Satya's very like in his scenes that very like he's watching, he's listening quietly while all this madness is happening. But it's all blocked because he's blocked. So you've got those kind of very clean blocks going on. And then you have Bhiku Matre who's got absolutely no control over that. His emotions, that kind of thing, and flying and all of that, and then you take on that pace in the way you cut, and so I've subconsciously always try to stay true to these characters. Whether it's these films that I mentioned with Shahid, and you see Shahid Azmi's character Rajkumar Rao's energy in that film, and that also had a certain kind of a pacing and it had a certain kind of a cutting pattern. You see Aligarh and you see Professor Cyrus, who's in his 60s and he's more like uh, 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 he has music in him, he has lyrics in him, he has poetry in him. Words are calculated. There are moments that he takes pauses before and after and during. Uh, so that lent itself to the way the film was also cut. You see, so that's kind of what I try and follow. The most powerful character in the film, the one that is the soul of the film. You stay true to uh, that person's sensibility, that person's logic. Uh, you know, and you don't add those elements that wouldn't work with that person. So the editing journey has always been great fun, right from the masala mixes, uh, because it can be happening through your fingers and stuff like that. But you realize at some point you're a channel. Uh, so many of the things that are at some point going to be called brilliant and genius have happened because of a mistake that you put the wrong shot on the wrong thing and hey, hold on, wow, that works so well. Arey wow, those kind of things like, or you kind of were trying something and it just wouldn't happen and you created some mess and it was just horrible and you said pack up today and you came back the next day and you watched that mess. It's like, hold on, what's that emerged there? Who's that guy? Why didn't I pay attention to him? You know? So there's a lot of that spontaneity, that magic that happens on editing, which I kind of love.
Yeah, Manoj Bajpayee in Aligarh has a dialogue which is, you have already answered it, but for more clarity, words are not that important. It's the pause in between them that matters. So, while writing a screenplay or while editing a scene, do you give importance to those pauses that are in between?
Yes and no. There are certain screenplays where you don't want to spoon feed the actor or the director. You basically, once the character description is clear, once we understand who this character is, uh, one should leave it also to the actor to interpret it. So the too much micromanagement of how he should act it. Uh, like for example, in Aligarh, I didn't write in where uh, Cirrus will pause, but I wrote in a dialogue about pauses, about the gaps between the words where the poetry is. You know, knowing fully well that a good actor will take this to another level. It's a cue. Uh, you know, so not necessarily write in that level of detail as to how the actor should perform. I think that's best left to an actor and not a writer.
So can you talk about writing Aligarh, because we have talked a lot about Satya. Let's focus on other films, and one of your most important films, according to me, is Aligarh. Uh, so can you talk about the writing process, how this story came to you, and how did you approach this story?
Aligarh was the story of Aligarh for a gay man who's grown up. Uh, reasonably closeted in the country and opening one by one closet doors every few years, and then uh, that story is building in you since you're a child. The story of a society that others you, uh, that doesn't really acknowledge you, and if it does by making fun of you, uh, by refusing to include you in its celebrations, and refusing to give you status as a family person, uh, a husband, wife, father. Uh, you're you're acutely aware since you're a child that no matter how progressive the person sitting in front of you is, very often he enjoys all these benefits, living a life where everything is possible, and for some reason you are not. You're not. So stories like Aligarh are born over decades. Mhm. Uh, they get amplified when you know some remarkable uh, moment in history that in 2009 the Delhi High Court uh, gets up and says we've decriminalized homosexuality. These guys who have been wrongly, you know, cornered for all these years, and they're free now. You know, and you get out onto the streets and you dance and you celebrate. You say today I can live with courage and all of that, and for 3 or 4 years you live in that illusion, and then suddenly one day the Supreme Court says, "Oh, sorry, the mistake, wrong. We don't agree with this. These guys are criminals, and we're the higher court of the country telling you go back into your closet." So that 2013 December judgment by the Supreme Court, where gay people, LGBTQ people were called a minuscule minority that didn't really deserve representation because it was such a small minority that matlab, it doesn't even count, you know. And that was wrong on so many counts because this is a democracy, and a democracy says that as a minority you have rights, you know. So what are you talking about? And it's so untrue that this is a minuscule minority. You know, I to think that there are so many gay people in this country, and my film industry, baap re, there are out, there might be गिन चुन के 5-6 लोग must be out of the closet, but I know personally how many people are closeted or out and open to their friends and this thing, and I'm like, but this is an erroneous statement. It's wrong, you know. So there was a lot of anger that was uh, that one felt after the 2000 judgment, 2013 Supreme Court judgment, and the desire to tell a story that was had a dignified portrayal of an LGBTQ character. You know, uh, there were enough dostanas and student of the years out there uh, to reinforce that whole stereotype, ignorance about the community. It's too much of that, actually. Uh, and so, in this was the desire around this time, and sometime before this, I had been invited to a news channel debate. NDTV was doing some debate, and I don't remember the subject, but it was something completely different from what it eventually became. And I was waiting for me to be called into the recording room, whatever it was. And the producer who had invited me came to me, and I was not publicly out of the closet back in the day. Came to me and said, "Hey, did you hear that that gay professor from Aligarh was found dead?" I said, "Which one? The one that was in the paper a few days back? The one who was fired from his job?" And he said, yeah, yeah, yeah. I said, what's his name? He said, Professor Siras. I said, God, whenever I tried to do some, like, find out what had happened. And suddenly comes back to me and says, look, we're not doing that previous story anymore. We're going to talk about Professor Siras. Would you like to speak about him? I said, no, to be honest, I only know this much. This is पढ़ लो यार पढ़ लो कुछ करो अपना रिसर्च करो और आ जाओ बात करो आप हो यहाँ पर. This producer knew about my sexuality. So I went on to stage, onto the recording. The first thing the anchor Sonia Singh introducing me, we have Apurva Asrani. I had never written a script by then. I was an editor. We were doing Shahid at that. And she says, we have with us film writer Apurva Asrani. She probably is quite prophetic. Who is a gay, right? And I'm like, okay, then I've been outed to the whole of the country and probably the world. I'll have to deal with this. Um, what do you think happened with Professor Singh? And that was it. I mean, I was uh, suddenly out of the closet, talking about this man I had no clue about, getting to know all this information about him, and it became a very big deal. The fact that he had been found dead under mysterious circumstances. And then we went back to our normal lives, and in 6 days, he went from page 1 to 3 to 6 to nowhere. It was gone, and that's it. You get your sensational stories, you get your thing, you've ticked that box के हमने बात तो करी इसके बारे में, whatever, and then it's gone. And I think that the 2013 judgment was also uh, there was so much hurt within one system that I think somewhere around 2015, was it 14 or 15, my director Hansal Mehta, who made Aligarh, he received an email from a girl who had never written a film, had worked in PR, Ishani, from Delhi. And she wrote to him saying that I just saw Shahid and I love what you all have done with the film. And have you heard of Professor Siras? You know, so you guys should definitely tell his story. So 6:30 in the morning, Hansal called me. We used to have these chats. Our best, most creative chats on Shahid, on Aligarh, on City Lights have been 6:37 in the morning before the world wakes up. The best chats, you know. And he said, this story and whatever. Weren't you on the debate with on this? I said, yes, exactly. I mean, and the story has disappeared. So he said, what do you think? Do you think we'll be able to write this? You know. By then, Shahid had happened. I had been launched as a co-writer thanks to Hansal again. So I said, not only am I going to write this, I said, Hansal, I'm going to give this my all. This is the most important, like you said, one of your most important films. And I knew it right then. Uh, because, like I said, these stories are inside of you for so many years. It's not just something you read outside of you and you said, hey, इस पे हम कुछ बनाते हैं. And that's how Aligarh was born. And Hansal has been a friend of mine since the year 1999. We did our first film together, Dil Pe Mat Le Yaar. I worked at his promos then. Manoj had introduced us. So it had been, he knew my struggle. He knew what this meant to me. He said, I'm not going to ever control or stop you from expressing yourself. So, and that was beautiful, but it was also problematic because sometimes I send him a draft, he said, very good. I'm like, no, 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 I hate it, let's do one more. He said, but it's truthful, it's honest, I want this. I said, I will retain that, but we need to push it a little bit more because nobody's done this before, It's important that we do it right. Yeah.
As you said, nobody has done that. So before Aligarh, there were not many films that were made on the LGBTQ plus related themes, and of course there was Fire and My Brother Nikhil, but that was, I think, it. And in general, the narrative on homosexuality in Hindi cinema is very homophobic, if we see. So, do you see any evolution happen in the way Hindi cinema deals with LGBTQ plus related themes? Because we see some new stories being told very recently. So, how do you see this queer representation in Hindi cinema?
I am just very grateful, Ishan, if you ask me, because I grew up with zero representation. Uh, and it was quite problematic because you'd be around people who were making these horrible jokes about gay people, horrible. They're sitting there without a voice, uh, and they're talking about you, and then one day they're going to come for you. There was no representation. You could not say कि hey नहीं ऐसा नहीं है तुमने टॉम हैंक्स को देखा फिलाडेल्फिया में. That also came later. You know, we didn't have anything like that. We had zero. So there was no way you could even have that conversation. Today is very different. Today I meet people in like kids at gay bars. When I say kids, I mean early 20s, stuff like that. So like, thanks to uh, Aligarh, I could come out to my parents. So thanks to Made in Heaven, I could come out to my parents. And I said, how did that happen? He said, no, I just showed them the film. And 2 months later, we had a conversation about my sexuality, you know. And I realized how important it is to have good representation, to have dignified representation. And when I say my definition of dignified is the fact that Professor Siras's identity is not his sexuality. Professor Siras's identity is that he's a professor, he's the chairman of the linguistics department, he's a poet, he writes incredible poetry, he's a lover of Hindi songs and music and trips on Lata Mangeshkar songs alone, drinking his whiskey. You know, that's that is Professor Siras. And the fact that he's lonely and he has this man, you can call him his boyfriend, who's a rickshaw puller, and they have a relationship where they both help each other in whichever way. And I see no, and so there's a holistic kind of a way to perceive this character. You know, even what Zoya Akhtar and Reema Katki did with Made in Heaven. You know, uh, they had a character who was a wedding planner, a damn bloody good wedding planner. You know, he was somebody who was an incredible good best friend. He had this wonderful relationship with. Um, so there were all these different layers to him, and the fact that he's gay and he has sex with men, and he's trying to come to terms. His family's trying to come to terms with that and all of that. So you see, there are things that everyone connected with. With Aligarh, people my father's age were able to identify with the loneliness of a 65-year-old man, somebody who's lost many of his friends, who are either dead and gone or incapable of, maintaining those relations at this age with ill health and whatever, you know. And a lot of your loved ones have died, passed on, and you just, what do you do with your life, you know? And someone like my dad, who I would think would have been reasonably homophobic when I was young and growing up, to see him crying, watching Professor Siras in Aligarh and identifying with him, and he was no longer the other. Uh, you know, these things are very, very, very important. And so today, if you notice, there are so many people who are out of the closet, and it's become far easier. I understand it's also a certain section of society that enjoys it more than the others, but this is also aspirational. People follow that at different, from different backgrounds, and the representation. There are some movies that really just do it in order to tick the box. के become ने LGBTQ friendly film बनाई, ha ha he hum log gay hai, that kind of thing also, which irritates me, because you've not felt the heart of the character, you have not really understood the pain of the character before you can understand the joy of the character. they both exist hand in hand. But at the same time, I see that these films are also important. You see, because the conversation goes further. Then you have a series like Arya, where you have um, her nemesis is Khan, this character, Arya's nemesis, uh, and he's a hard nosed cop who doesn't even play straight. No pun intended. And somewhere during the line, you realize that his partner, this man, is coming in with lunch and dabba to the police station, and the cops are sort of joke maar rahe hain ki darwaza band karo and this and that, whatever, while you're having. And it would have been the same if his girlfriend was coming or his new bride was coming. They would have teased him like this, you know. Then that guy wants Khan wants him to move out of the house because his mother is coming to stay and to hotel mein reh lo. And nowhere has it ever talked about gay rights and yeah and wo and whatever. It's just a moment from their lives, and it doesn't even impact the story in a major way. It's just a shade to the character. So I thought, even something like that was a very important kind of a character and portrayal. Uh, Badhai Do, I thought, had a lot of heart. Again, I wept in that film because the you know the question they raise is then they ask is, is an LGBTQ person not entitled to fatherhood or to motherhood, to parenting a child? And I'm in my mid 40s right now. What am I going to look forward to? What's the next stage? I don't have that option. Uh, you know, so I feel like a film like Badai Do, really touched upon that issue very sensitively. And so there are, like, for example, Modern Love Mumbai, which Hansel again made and stuff. So I didn't feel for that film. I didn't feel the moment that you couldn't have the two boys uh, kissing properly, and you had to show it in a clandestine in a way in which you're hiding them and doing that kind of a thing. Uh, Even the way they meet, a gay man just goes and strikes a conversation with a closeted gay man in a bar, like it would happen in New York. We can't do it like that. We can't do it like that. This is too much. There's too much fear. There's been too much backlash from society. There are other ways in which. So while my regret is that they did not have uh, LGBTQ representation in the writing department, you can also see that their intention to make something, for LGBTQ people or for themselves to understand is pure, So the whole thing kind of fits into the spectrum right now. It might not appeal to everyone, but uh, they're important nevertheless. So it's a good time. It's a really good time. There's a lot of lip service. There's a lot of projects that just want to tick the box. But at the same time, there is a conversation, there's a debate, people asking why aren't more queer actors being cast? Uh, and then people like me answer and say, because we want the best actors for the role, and if the queer actors are trained, and then the answer is, then why aren't you training them, and why aren't we training them? And that's giving rise to workshops and things like that, where trans act people are being trained to be actors, where Hamsafar or Trust in Bombay, the LGBTQI organization. What they are doing is they have a workshop called Likho, which is for young LGBTQ writers, to train them. And then, I've been on the panel for years with them. And then there are different people from cinema who come and mentor them, so they can bring their voice and their story. So these things are all action reaction. वो गलतियां भी जरूरी होती हैं, in order to, uh, yeah.
So that was supposed to be my next question about this critic. This film critics and LGBTQ community members often complain that the lead actor is not a gay man or somebody from the community playing the character. So do you feel the same, that things can, the situation would be better in few years? You said workshops are happening, people are training trans people or people from the community to act, because acting is again a specialized kind of thing. Not everybody can act in front of a camera. And do you think it would be better if someone from the community played the role of Professor Sinha in Aligarh instead of Manoj Bajpayee?
I don't think anybody could have played it better than Manoj Bajpayee, Professor Siras, the heart that Manoj Bajpayee. So that's the thing about acting, right? It's a training. You know, you've really learned to observe, to imbibe. There's a certain method to it. You know, it's not just for anybody to get up and do it. I'm a gay man. I've lived my life reasonably openly and stuff like that. But you tell me to go and act, I don't have the training. You know, I will not be able to do as good a job as a trained actor, and that's very important thing to understand. The best actor for the job. You see, uh, having said that, I mean, you know, if tomorrow you have movie actors who also happen to be gay, you know, uh, uh, would they ace the audition better because they understand that so deeply? Yes, maybe, but yeah, who's out of the closet here? Gone hand, there's nobody. You know, people are still afraid. Actors are still extremely afraid to come out of the closet. You know, they may worry that they won't get certain kind of roles and all. Though I don't think this climate anymore is like that. You know, you are celebrated for your roles, and you can go and play a straight role and a gay role, and all these actors are doing it. Uh, you know, uh, but I do definitely think that presentation. See, one sec, I just got hit by my own light. I definitely think that representation in the writing department, is very important. You know, so if you have a team of writers and one of them happens to be LGBTQIA and kind of understands that subject, uh, Hansel had done a wonderful thing with Aligarh. Not only did he have someone like me to write it, Ishani was also a collaborator on it, identifies as a heterosexual woman. Then we had a trans man on the crew. We had a lesbian woman on the crew. We had a heterosexual man as the director on the crew. You see, so somewhere, I think uh, the entire team was so uh, sensitive to the material that you could feel it. Like you couldn't put a foot wrong. यहाँ से आवाज आ जाती, यहाँ से आवाज आ जाती. If you've done it like that, Uh, and that's also why Zoya Akhtar got me on to edit Made in Heaven. Because here she was making, creating something about a gay man, a protagonist, a gay protagonist, and stuff. And she felt like an editor like me would be a prism through which you could understand that were we being sensitive enough, were we going off somewhere, those kind of things. So I feel like this is very responsible filmmaking. Uh, I think we need more of this.
Yes. So I was reading somewhere that a film like Shahid, the written script was very different from what we saw on the screen, and that the original script was very non-linear in some senses. So how was that? How did Hansel approach you for this film, and what was the approach of editing this film and making it more linear for the public?
I had semi-retired from movies and left Bombay. I always leave Bombay and go away somewhere where I don't have to breathe that ambitious, you know, power-driven kind of a thing. I struggle with it. Uh, so I find every few years I run off to some place and I live there. And somehow it's my destiny that I'm supposed to be part of these movies that the industry calls me back. And I go also with a renewed kind of a energy and more faith and more hope in my system. So I was in a similar place living in Bangalore at the time, and Ansel kept was in touch with me over a film that he wanted to make, and he wanted me to come and edit. Um, and I always found that the film was a bit too dark and felt like maybe it glorifies a bad guy, historically a bad character, Omar, who later we made Omar based on. So I would have arguments with him, very morally driven arguments with him. Like, do you think we should be making a film about this guy? Shouldn't we be telling the story about the good guys and all of that? So that never really happened. There were different iterations of the script that kept coming. The script had one character that was a lawyer that meets Omar in jail, that Omar meets in jail and attempts to brainwash or whatever. Uh, and that lawyer's name was Shahid Azmi. He was very much alive at the time. Then, 2010, again the year, like with Professor Siras also was killed in 2010. There was a news story that I read that Shahid Azmi had been shot dead in his office. Uh, Within 2 weeks, I had another email from Hansel saying that, Apu, I'm changing the script and I'm making it about Shahid. You know, so I was like, oh, that's great. That's amazing because this is the and I rested my case about the kind of characters we should tell, whose stories we should tell, and before I knew it, there was an email in my inbox which had the poster of Shahid. The working title at the time was based on a true story, BOTS, Bots. That was the working title. It had a silhouette of Rajkumar Yadav at the time, who I had just seen in a movie called LSD, where I thought he was fantastic. And it was a law book and stuff like that. And it had Hansa's name as a director, Anurag Kashyap's name as a producer, and my name as the editor. And it's just like, okay, that's a leap of faith. You would even ask me, but maybe this is my destiny. So I went to Bombay, and then they had a semblance of a script, but it was again it was vignettes and scenes, in pretty much a non-linear kind of a format. Um, and Ansel just was, when they say bhoot sawar hai, you obsessed. That obsession was so powerful in Hansel at that point in time that he just started shooting the film with whatever resources he had. And the film was made very organically. He would shoot these scenes and then suddenly run out of money. And so what do you do when you have no money? You edit. So you just sit and edit. So my mom is a hairstylist. So she has a salon in Lokhandwala in Bombay. So there was another section of a salon which had a backwash for hair wash and stuff like that. So that became my chair, and I put an editing. I put a setup, an avid setup in the salon, and that's where we cut Shahid because it was so low budget. We just didn't have any money, and we would really jam on these scenes and find newer ways of. And when you have an actor like Rajkumar, especially at that point in time when he was just bursting with this new uh, performance that nobody had seen, and Hansal would just capture this. Hansal's old habit since we started working together many years ago. हाँ शूट करो ये एंगल से शूट करो अपू संभाल लेगा अपू संभाल लेगा वो कर देगा and when you have actors like Rajkumar, KK Menon, and all these people, it's a real treat to have it covered and shot in that manner. It's also extreme. It's a lot of hard work because you have so many options, uh, and then you have to find the right one. So that was my job primarily, to put these scenes together. And of course, the spirit and the anger of what had happened to. I think anger is a very important factor in most of these films that we are discussing, whether it is a Satya, or whether it is Shahid, or whether it is Aligarh. There's a lot of anger there. There's something wrong that's happening. We're living through it. And your cinema as a tool that's able to kind of put it out there, without minding its P's and Q's, and kind of recording, like, history, putting it out there for like what you're trying to do, archiving stuff. So these are all kind of that's a time in history that is recorded now for posterity. Satya is not just an underworld film. Satya is what was happening to Bombay and the film industry in the mid to late 90s. It's a testament of that. Aligarh is a testament of what the community has gone through for that long. And soon after Aligarh, there was such a beautiful discourse in the media. Everyone just took up, the film, the argument of the film, the discussion. You know, the Supreme Court judgment, Professor Siras's story was quoted by the Supreme Court judges. You see, so somehow Shahid is again recording. Uh, you know, um, so one was deeply aware of this fact, and the injustice that had happened with a man who was fighting for people who for the voiceless, uh, you know, who could just be put behind bars because of mere suspicion. You could put them in jail for 12, 14, 15 years, uh, on mere suspicion. So this is injustice that was. So this is what drove us to tell the story. And while editing the film, what happened was, we would realize that we don't have the money to shoot that scene where what do you say, the Mujahideen guy blows himself up and the entire camp. So you create a shortcut in the edit and says कि इसकी जरूरत है नहीं हंसर, देखो इसको ऐसा करना है, एक ऐसा सीन हम लोग यहाँ लिखते हैं जिसमें ये होता है, दोनों के बीच एक कॉन्वर्सेशन होती है, उसके उसके आगे हमको कुछ है नहीं, वो एस्केप करता है शायद यहाँ से, मगर यार अपू एस्केप के लिए तो हमने वो शॉट नहीं लिया, अब हम नहीं जा सकते वापस हिमाचल शूट करने को, कश्मीर शूट करने को, हिमाचल नहीं जा सकते वापस. तो लाइक ओके छोड़ो, लेट मी फिगर आउट अ वे. हाँ, ट्रेनिंग मोन्टाज में वो he's going from here and he's sliding down these hills and whatever, and he's lagging behind Shahid in that. So there's nobody else there in certain moments. They've all gone and jumped on those, done the training. और एंड में शाहिद आया, अगर मैं ये काट दूं, इनके बिट्स काट दूं and just have Shahid sliding from here, running from here, can I cheat it to look like he escaped from the camp, which was never meant to be the case. You see, his friend was to have blown himself up, and a lot of transpired certain events. So the rewriting of these kind of things became a thing that we started doing on the in the editing room, even writing certain scenes and stuff like that. Like when Shahid gets these phone calls, अपने आप को गांधी समझता है, जिहादियों का गांधी. So that's a line I wrote there, thinking that यार nobody's going to have the guts to use this line in the movie. मैं लिख देता हूँ, वो राइटर को बुला के वो उसको कर देंगे ठीक. Not only did he, but Hansel dubbed it in his own voice. That kind of thing. And it stayed. So before I knew it, I had become a screenwriter, on the film, and Hansel had insisted on crediting me as a screenplay writer on the film. And so that's how the editing and the screenplay kind of it blended into one. And I've always felt that editing and screenplay writing are kind of very closely related. Yeah.
No, let's move from these anger-related films to some comedy, and I'm talking about a film that is not available anywhere now. I've just heard about that film, and for which you got the national award. You were the youngest recipient of the National Film Awards. It's called Snip. So, can you talk about your film's Snip and how was the editing? What was the film like? Because we don't know about Snip at all.
Yeah, there were a bunch of films I did back in the day, including Chal and Snip, that were a little ahead of their times, because the multiplex boom happened just 1 year or 2 years after they released. So these are not single screen films. Snip is a film by this ad filmmaker from the Sippy family. His name is Sunil Sippy. Uh, it was his debut film. He was very impressed with my work on Satya and stuff, and he called me to edit this film. And I read the script and I was chuckling away because it was a dark comedy about a hairstylist that by mistake snips the ear of a eccentric aging actor who's going to make his comeback. And he does this full histrionics and overacting and drama and runs through the house with blood gushing out of his thing and hits the commode with his head and falls and dies. So now there's this dead body in the house. There's his old friend who used to be a egg seller played by Makran Deshpande, who's coming here to start a new egg business and he wants to talk to this actor friend of his. There's an underworld guy, which is again the same time, played by Saurabh Shukla, who's coming to extort money from him. There's her boyfriend, Sophia Haq plays the hairstylist, Nikhil Chinnappa who's coming, and there's this body in the house of this crazy overacting thespian who's lying dead in a pool of blood after his ears been snipped. Right? I just thought that we don't do movies like this in our country. We take ourselves so seriously, and I love the humor. There's an actress called Nadira way back from the 50s and 60s. So Nadira was playing the maid in the house who has a couple of drinks and has her own take on things, and you know that. So I thought it was a wacky, crazy film. And that director really knew how to use his camera and this production design. Suzanne Kaplan Meraji, she's done a lot of Excel work for Zoya and Farhan. Like, incredible. You should maybe at some stage talk to her. What a production designer. She also lives in Goa, by the way. So just to have a team like that, Rasool did the sound design, and it was a great team. And he made a really very very entertaining film. And we cut it very crisp. We cut it very in a very what do you say eccentric manner almost. Just the cutting pattern reflected the eccentricity of the characters and that kind of a thing. Um and very excited. English mein bani hai film, all of that. Premiere happens, critics don't get it, or most of them don't get it. Chalo, theek hai, critics didn't get it, but audience will come. Audience also doesn't come. यू नो 5-6 लोग बैठे हैं थिएटर इतने बड़े सिंगल स्क्रीन में. यू नो शिट फिनिश्ड यार, खत्म हो गई फिल्म. डैम, ऐसी फिल्में नहीं चलती. दैट डायरेक्टर सेड आई एम नेवर मेकिंग अ फिल्म अगेन. एंड नाउ ही मेड वन रिसेंटली विद Sonakshi Sinha, which is that one Zoya something. Recently he made Sunil Sippy. um I want to say Zoya Factor, but I might have got it wrong. Anyway, so
Was it Noor?
yeah, some 3 years back or 2 years back.
Or was it Noor?
Noor, was it Noor? I think so.
Yeah, Noor, I think. Yeah.
I think so, yes. This is after 2000, the year 2000 to now. That man was so hurt that nobody got his film. you know. Anyway, we all forgotten. We all moved on with our lives and all that. 1 year later, I get a call from a friend saying, "Apu, congrats, you won the national award." I'm like, "What, for Satya?" 2 years later. So he's saying, "No, not for Satya, for Snip." I said, "Mazak mat kar yaar. What are you talking about?" So he really, Snip was won the national award for best editing. So I was like, "What, really? Really?" I opened the papers and all. It was true. I don't know how, how it happened. Miracles do happen. But that film deserved recognition, and at least through this one award that we garnered from the film, it will always be a national award winning film. But I don't think that he or his producers took the failure at that point in time of the film too well. Otherwise, the film would have been sold, would have been on a platform, would have been on DVD. It really deserves that, kind of thing. Yeah. So,
Thank you for mentioning that, because when we were researching, we found that nobody asked you about Snip, so we thought we must keep this as a question because people don't know about Sniff that much. And other film that is not mentioned in this whole body of work you have done is a film that was nominated for Oscars, official entry for Oscars from India at one point of time. I think in 2012, Jalpari, the the desert mermaid, and the child actor also won the national award for that film, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, he did. He was incredible.
Yeah, so can you
I,
talk about that film? I think that the maker was the same as
you're talking. So he made I Am Kalam, for which again the child actor won the national award. And uh, did Lehar Khan also win the national award for Jalpari? I've forgotten right now. I'm not sure. So I worked with Neela Madhav Panda, who's a very conscientious filmmaker. He's actually a documentary filmmaker who kind of takes the subjects of his documentary films and stuff like that and makes cinema like this. Um, I was in Bangalore in my exile period before Hansal. Madhav came to me with I Am Kalam, and basically to do the promos and stuff. He wanted to sell the film, you know. And so he jammed with me in my spare room in Bangalore, and we did that, and we had a wonderful association. I Am Kalam did very well. It was so nice to see my name back on the credits of a film after a long time. And then he offered me Jalpari, the Desert Mermaid, which is about female infanticide uh, up north towards Haryana and stuff like that, where the male-female ratio is quite skewed. I don't remember the exact number, but the number of boys to girls is like incredible difference there, because the girl child is often killed at birth. Um, and what was amazing about the film was he wanted to make a children's film uh, with this witch in a forest and things like that, which turns out to be this macabre reality where you're just uh, it's a facade of this legend of this witch and this jalpari that emerges to save the day, uh, and how that reality is actually so much darker behind it. So I love working with Madhav, an extremely passionate uh, filmmaker. I love the subjects he chooses and the actors that he picks, and the way he works with child actors, whether it was Harsh Meyer in I'm Kalam or it was Lehar Khan in this film. Uh, he manages to retain an innocence in his characters and his story, but yet talk about such dark and twisted truths that are enough to blow away your innocence forever. You know, he manages this extremely well. Uh, yeah, he made, I think, a film on the climate change crisis, on the water crisis. That's Mother for you. So yeah, I was very happy to be part of that film. There was another film again which I did, which was the only Indian film to win a Bangladeshi national award. It ran for a record number of weeks in Bangladesh. It was about the liberation war in Bangladesh, set in the 70s. It's a film called Children of War, which is available to watch actually. I'm very proud of that film. It is so uh, blood curdling, what Mrityunjay Devrat has done. Again, actors like Farooq Sheikh and not Tilotma Shom. Was Tilotma in it? No, it wasn't Tilotma. Yes, it was Tilotma was in it. There was a great cast. It was just an incredible cast, uh, and how he showed when Pakistan was had attacked and was basically taking over Bangladesh. What they had done was that they had instituted these rape camps where women were impregnated with Pakistani with the Pakistani seed. So this kind of takeover would have never been imagined before. Like there is no way that generations will have to be Pakistani because of this. Very difficult film, very chilling film with some crazy visuals that I have never seen before. And as an editor, I really did some very exciting work. Like, I'm just so happy I have it on my resume. Again, a very long film. The director loved everything about his film, so he kept pretty much everything in. We fought a lot on that. I was like, it should be at least half an hour, 40 minutes shorter. And he's like, no, you should. Basically, I want it all. And it served its purpose for what he wanted it to achieve. It also was screened at the Mumbai Film Festival, got a really good response. So, yeah, that was also a film that I'm very proud of.
Yeah, and other film also, we can also mention Waiting, Nasir Sahab and Kalki Kekla, and it's about the unconditional love, and their partners are in the hospital, and there's this relationship that they kind of develop in the waiting room. I think that is another beautiful film that I watched, I think 5 years ago or something. And so was Jalpari, the Desert Mermaid, and I Am Kalam. All these films kind of are so beautiful in themselves that you keep on watching them again and again after intervals. So thanks so much for editing such wonderful films, for being part of so many beautiful projects. Um, and I'll come to the web series part, because you have made, and I think you are writing web series right now, and that might be out sometime soon. So when you were making, you were editing Made in Heaven season 1 for Amazon Prime, was there ever a situation during season 1 where the show was supposed to go one way but ended up in a totally different way while editing the season?
I would say Maiden Heaven is probably one of my only projects that is so close to the director's vision. When you have someone like Zoya Akhtar on board, she's her editor's nightmare. She really is. No doubt about it. Because she's quite a perfectionist. Uh, and she's dead sure about what it is she wants to achieve. You know, she works bloody hard on her, the way she sets projects up, the way she writes them. There are no shortcuts for her. So she demands that kind of thing from her crew, especially from her editing team, her editors and stuff like that. So I went in with this whole like, I'm a star editor, that I'm given a free hand, right from Ram Gopal Verma, who's trying to peek in through the little glass thing, and I'm like, no, you can't come in, and that kind of thing. Uh, with Zoya, it was quite different. I mean, she did give me some space to work in the beginning and to kind of interpret. But then she came and said, "No, what is this? Oh, I don't like this. Or this. Change this, change that. Whatever. I wanted back to what it was. I wanted back to what it was." So there's a lot of that, which is also a great learning. But even within that, I got a certain space to be able to explore a certain style. Like there again, I had done something with the background music and cut it in a particular irreverent manner. There's a show called Please Like Me on Netflix, which is a wonderfully written coming of age comedy, but with a heart. So I use the background music of Please Like Me as a reference for Made in Heaven, and I cut a lot of the montages and stuff like that. Then I did some interesting things with the montage. Those kind of things she really liked and retained. The rest of it was all exactly what she wanted to the T. Uh, you know, except the arguments that one would have about the characters, about the discussions that one would have about you know a gay man and him meeting at a party and what happens there and how the sex happens and this and that and all of those things. She would be very keen to know my perspective and be very respectful of it. You see, so it was wonderful. I put together a team that we worked. There were a whole bunch of my assistants who became editors with that show. It was also the show in which towards the end of it, I got struck with. I became very unwell with something called Bell's palsy, where I had facial paralysis. So the right side of my face got completely destroyed at that point in time. And I developed a certain kind of vertigo, which meant that anything moving would make me just go flat like that, or fall. Uh, so it became very difficult to cut the later episodes. So I had to rely a lot on my team, and edits would come home where I would be lying down like that and looking at. So it was extremely challenging. It was extremely challenging, but it also gave me a lot of strength to deal with the condition. Uh, and that whole team was just remarkable the way they supported me through this. When the show came out, finally saw what it became and stuff like that. It really felt like an achievement to have been able to survive what one survived to do it.
No, it's a beautiful show, and we all are waiting for the season two of it, because the way it ended. So my next question is, when how do you plan as an editor the beginning and the end of a web series? Because I think it's very tricky to know where to end and where to stop the narrative, so that it could be continued from season two. And how is your approach different from a film and to a web series?
I don't think this is in a web series. There's so much hard work that goes into the script, especially with the kind of players that we're discussing, like Zoya and Excel and stuff like that, and Amazon Prime, that they go through a lot of debates and discussions and powwows to ensure that before they get down to shooting it, they know damn bloody well where it's ending and how it's ending. Your job as an editor is to maintain like I've mentioned earlier, the emotional graph of the characters, to maintain, and especially with a multi-character um, show like Made in Heaven, where you have so many characters whose tracks are important and have to run parallel, and you have to ensure that their emotional graph and the next character where he's picking up from, there is some kind of a match where they are at and where this one is at. It can't just be like a vakya scene hai, ek scene yahan hua, ek scene yahan hua, because the audience is also invested emotionally into. So then you move things around in order to maintain that graph and things like that. These things happen very organically and very naturally uh, during the process. But what you are referring to here is an attribute of the writing. Uh, they had a team of remarkable writers, including Zoya and Rima, who, like I said, leave very little to chance.
Yeah.
You know, the opposite of Ram Gopal, you know, just the opposite. Uh, you know what I'm trying to say? So, criminal justice, though, they show that uh, that I wrote for Disney Hotstar with Pankaj Tripathi and Vicky Kulhari. Here I was mindful of the fact that we will go into a season three, and where am I leaving each character? Am I closing their threads so tight that उसको खोलना मुश्किल हो जाएगा बाद में? Or am I leaving you with a little bit of I want more? You know, so whether it's Madhav, that's Pankaj Tripathi's relationship with his young wife, his new wife, and where is that leading to, and how resolved is that? So how much are we resolving? Because you have to leave the audience with a sense of कि मतलब I invested in these 8 episodes, 9 episodes, or एक resolution तो मिला, but at the same time I want to bring them back for the next season where they are like, हाँ पूरी कहानी तो नहीं पता, you know, there are other things that can be unraveled. Uh, so as a writer, one is definitely more mindful of where exactly one wants to end, and how definite is that ending, and what is a vague idea of where one wants to go with the next uh, season if one works on it.
Yeah, and we all are excited for the season two of Made in Heaven. And now that you have mentioned, and my next question was supposed to be, because you are both an editor and a writer. So do you have this tendency of writing a screen, story or a scene, and at the same time editing it, instead of writing the whole sequence and then kind of coming back to it and revisiting it. So you keep this in mind while writing, that this is where you are going to uh, pause, or or stop the narrative, and then in the next season you'll bring back this character, or you'll start from here and end there. So you have this whole plan before starting to write the show, if I got that right.
Well, you don't really necessarily know the next season when you're writing this one, you know, or I don't even think you're thinking about it. It's so writing goes through several. It's a process that you go through several drafts, right? Um, what Since I have been an editor and a writer, I know the importance of separating the editing from the writing, because the tendency to edit while you're writing is very strong. तो तुमने ये एक पेज तुम लिख रहे हो, तुमको नहीं यार ये तो कुछ ज्यादा ही बोल गया है यहाँ पर, इतना क्यों दिखा रहे हैं यार, ये इसको बहुत एक्सपोज कर दिया, तो मतलब आगे का कुछ लिखा ही नहीं. We haven't written anything further, and I'm already editing this scene, so I can get into what I call analysis paralysis, where you can just go round and round in that scene and trying to get that scene right, uh, which I think is a mistake. uh, I think what's important is the writer should be given a complete free hand. The editor should take a break. तो वॉमिट करो, निकालो जो भी है वहां पर पेपर, यू नो, गुड बैड अगली बाद में देखा जाएगा. योर जॉब राइट नाउ इज टू क्रिएट अ ड्राफ्ट, बिकॉज नथिंग एग्जिस्ट. एक बार वो ढांचा आ गया तुम्हारा, you have a beginning, middle, end. You can see the flow. You know where your characters are. You know what your plot points are. You know, then you can look at it and say, hey, this is not working. This is too much. This is too less, and whatever. Because you have something. Not just you, your other collaborators also have something to discuss with you. As opposed to a blank page where everything's like khayali pulao. So that is why I think it's important to separate the editor. Once this process is done, then the editor wakes up and says to the writer, okay, you go have your lunch, go sleep, watch a movie. Okay. Now the editor is going to take over. And then the editor does a certain kind of a cleaning up, a certain kind of juxtaposition, uh, thinks about it more cerebrally. The writer I felt was more heart. कि मतलब निकाल दो यार जो भी है, वो रखो मत अंदर. The editor is more like from here, okay, how is it all looking together? How is it coming together? And then you start editing it, then you say, oh, he's speaking too much here. If I say it here, then वो बाद में का reveal वो कम पड़ जाएगा वहां पर. You start tempering it and doing this thing. Then that's when you start saying, okay, इसके बाद का next episode में क्या होगा, तब क्या होगा, next season में क्या होगा. That's the stage in which you can start thinking about it like that.
Yes. So now that we are almost towards the end of our conversation, there is a question that some of my 90s friends who call themselves the 90s kids have asked me to ask you about a very popular song that they heard when they were very young, called Tera Mera Pyar, Kumar Sanu's very popular song, Tera Mera Pyar. So can you tell us about that? And you were the director. You directed that music video.
Yeah, I directed and edited it actually. So it was a Sony Music, and they basically had these two songs. One was Tera Mera Pyar by Kumar Sanu, and the other one was Shreya Ghoshal, Ye Kya Hua. And they came to me and they said, look, we have budget only for one video. And that's Ye Kya Hua, Shreya Ghoshal. And we want to do Tera Mera Pyar, but इसके लिए budget नहीं है. So like, oh God, now what do you do? Because Tera Mera Pyar was my favorite song of the thing. So मर मर के and all that, they came to this thing कि चलो हम we'll give you 1 second. Adjust this. They said we'll give you a little money. You have only few hours of shooting. Make something for तेरा मेरा प्यार. उसको प्रोमो की तरह हम लोग रिलीज कर देंगे. अगर ये क्या हुआ मैं हम बनाएंगे सेट्स वगैरह ये सब because I had a whole plan for it. So I had worked out a concept called Romance at the Movies, uh, which uh, which I think was a tribute to my parents because if you remember how they met in the cinema hall where Sholay released. So my parents' anniversary was coming up in July. 12th July is the anniversary. Must have been the 30 something anniversary then. This was about 17 years ago. Uh, so must have been a 30th anniversary, some big anniversary. So I very surreptitiously decided to use this to create an anniversary present for my mom and dad. Obviously without telling Sony Music. So I created a theme called Romance at the Music Movies, where this couple meet at the cinema hall, exactly how my parents met. Of course, उसको थोड़ा सा हमने cinematic liberty करके और खेल खेला उसमें जैसे मिले सिनेमा हॉल में वो मिलते रहे ऑलमोस्ट मिलते हैं मगर मिलते नहीं जब तक वो सीट में they don't sit together. So I played a little bit with that thing and shot that video, the first video, in something like 8 hours. Uh, you know, and I had like choreography planned and all in that, in which the ticket seller does a little bit of a dance, and the uh, one serving the snacks also does a little. So the whole world is dancing and all that. In that time, it was complete flop. It was looking terrible, right? But what I got was some good shots of these two, the boy and the girl meeting, almost meeting, because they were a very good-looking couple and a very magnetic. Nimrat Kaur was her first video. The first time she actually, it was a debut. And I found, so I told my camera person, I told her to shoot this in slow motion, like in camera. I knew I had very few hours. How am I going to make a 5 minute song video? There'll be a problem there. So slow motion mein shoot karo. She said, slow motion the whole video. I said, yeah, just shoot it in slow motion. We'll see what happens. Because I don't think we have the time to do the whole, uh, cover the whole length of the song. So she started shooting it and हमको नहीं पता ये बाद में कैसे लगेगा, right? मतलब shoot कर रहे हैं लोग आए बैठे ये किया वो किया whatever and all that. Then in the editing room I'm seeing it, every turn is like that. Every sitting is like that. Like, shit, what if I mess this up? What's going to happen? Luckily, I'm an editor. So I started to cut it on a sync where if he sits back and he sits like this and there's a bounce back, that syncs would. "Tulsi gayi ho, da-da-da." So we try to get that audio synchronization with little things, popcorn in the hand and all that. I was like, shit, this I've not seen before. It's something new. I'm like, chalo, kaatte hain isko. And luckily, all that horrible choreography I could edit out of the film, of the video. And I just had these moments between these guys synced. And I kept long. And those are the days of Kata Laga and all these big hit songs where you had cuts every few frames. That's how it's done. One move of this, somebody's bosom, somebody's stomach, somebody's ass, somebody's this, moving like this and full liquid. And that was the whole thing. And now suddenly you have this really slow paced kind of a thing. And I was really nervous that the music, Sony Music would hate it. Uh, Luckily, the creative director, Danish, was a very sensible guy. He had the guts to take a chance. So he saw it. He said, "Do you think we should add a few more cuts, speed it up?" I said, "No, Danny, this is the thing, this is the new one, whatever." So he went and he spoke to this thing, and he went and convinced them. And the video did very well. It did. The second one also did well. The Shreya Ghosal one. We had nice choreography and everything, and that shot it also better. But there was something about the spirit of this one that caught on very well. And even today, I just for those days, the video they posted now in 2012 or 13, and it's got some 60 million views on YouTube, and it was unheard of back in the day. You know, people still write about how this was. I proposed to my girlfriend with this song. It was my college days, the thing, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes. So we are now on the final segment of this, which is recommendations and your take on film. So the first part is five filmmakers that inspire you. They could be masters or contemporary filmmakers.
Satyajit Ray, Akira Kurosawa, Gurudat, uh, Vishal Bhardwaj. God, now this is the tough one. We left with one, and there are so many out there. Who is there among the contemporary ones? I like so many. Anand Rai, I like his cinema. It's very different from this, but I like more hard hitting, realistic. Those kind of. Uh, who's there? I hope you're going to edit this. Suddenly, I have all five. Cut, 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 cut. Yeah, yeah. I would say I like Anand Rai's work. Uh, Divakar Banerjee, I've really enjoyed some of his films.
Hmm.
It's quite a visionary. There's a new filmmaker who is making film called Somendra Padi.
Hmm.
Somendra made Budhia, uh, Born to Run, the Budhia Singh film with Manoj Bajpayee, and he also made Jamtara on Netflix. I am very inspired by that guy's work. I really like his work. Chalo, panch ho gaye.
Five artists that you think are easy to edit because of their perfection in their craft.
Ones I've worked with, or ones that I have not necessarily worked with.
You have worked with.
Well, the obvious ones: Manoj Bajpayee, Rajkumar Rao. Uh, can I say Kangana Ranaut? Yes, I mean she's actually quite a delight as an actor to edit. Yeah. Um, then who else have I? Mohammad Zishan Ayub. I don't know if you've been following his work. He's, I think, an incredible actor. Nasiruddin Shah. I love working. I did two films. I did a film called Dharam Sankat Mein also, which I edited, which is actually quite a crazy film. It's on Amazon Prime. And so Nasir Saab, I think, is incredible. Pankaj Tripathi. Yeah, I think I've been quite lucky.
Yeah.
Very good actors. Yeah.
Uh,
Ho gaye pass.
yeah. Five films that shaped your understanding of cinema.
Gopika and Bhagavan. Sorry, Bengalis, for my pronunciation. Please don't hate me. Uh, then I like Reincarnation of Peter Proud. It was an important film for me. It was one of the first reincarnation movies that I saw, which were inspired Subhash Rai to do Curse. The way the storytelling was just crazy because you're going into the mind of this person who's remembering his past. The edit pattern, screenplay, everything kind of reflected that. That film shaped me. There was a film called Fiddler on the Roof with Topol, which is a musical, which I think is one of the greatest films of all time. Pyasa, Gurudat, uh, sheer poetry. This theme, what it's trying to say about how artists are not appreciated while they're alive, but posthumously, suddenly they're. It says a lot about our world and our society. Which, uh, of course, there's Godfather, there's Jani Bhi Do Yaro, there's the usual suspects. Uh, there are all these films which I'll club into one. हो गए 5.
So, any book that you recommend to?
Om, not was it Omkara?
Yeah.
Omkara nahi. No. Makbul.
Okay.
Makbul. Again, perfect. I thought one of those perfect films. Yeah.
By Vishal Bharadwaj, I think.
Shalva.
So, 5 books that you would like to recommend to everybody who wish to read good books.
Oh my God, I've stopped reading. Like I can say that aloud. Really stopped reading. But if I go back in time, I read a lot of Jeffrey Archer. I thought storytelling wise, glorious storytelling. As the Crow Flies, Cain and Abel. I used to read Robin Cook a lot. He did this book called Coma, which was incredible. It was about the medical system and the thriller. It's just a brilliant book. Uh, I'm an Ayn Rand fan, and I really love The Fountainhead. It's one of my favorite books. Uh, um, this is this other one that is one of my favorites. Maybe Tha, it was on my tongue. Uh, I read a lot of P.G. Woodhouse. Uh, so his Jeeves and Wooster series, I thought was just incredible stuff. Um,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that would do. That would do.
You need to be editing this, huh?
No,
Or put background music in between.
yeah,
That's what I did.
we will put the Satya background music in this.
Yeah, the real like thriller bit where we're anticipating what next. Yeah,
Yeah. So now the climax question, the final question, which could decide the fate of the interview. It is about your experience on Karwaan. How was the interview? Did you like the interview, the experience? And have you watched any other interviews of Karwaan Cinema Archives? Long
yeah.
question.
I asked you, no, for your two interview. You sent me two wonderful interviews. So there was one with Adur Gopal Krishnan, and there was one with Sham Benegal, which I both saw snatches of pretty much a lot of it, and feeling quite chuffed about the fact that I also saw a bit of Manu Pillai's work. That's how I discovered you guys. And yeah, quite chuffed that you are archiving film professionals who have been part of the industry for many years, and done some seminal work. And to be included among them is a great ego boost. I even wore a kurta for it today. So, I like what you're doing. I genuinely do because, like I was telling you earlier, uh, we live in a country where I think knowledge, uh, there's been an oral tradition of passing down knowledge, right from how it's been for thousands of since millennia. Uh, so I often found that one hasn't archived so many cinematic legends and very important people from our cinematic history, not just cinema, across the board, since we're talking about cinema here. And just for it to have like so much archival value to be got, somebody would reference it in the future and see the context behind these stories and the process behind these stories that were told. So I really like what you're doing. You're doing it in a very clean, non-sensational, so more power to you.
Thank you so much, Apur, for being part of the conversation, and we look forward to hosting you again after more work that you do. And I think you are currently in Goa, if I'm not wrong, and
That's right.
you'll be called back to Bombay very soon for another project that you will do for us. But thank you so much for this opportunity, Apur.
Most welcome. Happy to be on board.